Alright, so I'm going to take a break from the water tank and we're going to work on this deck up here. So I re-cored this deck back in, I think it was 2016, and then I just kind of left it alone up here. It's been covered up, and you can see all of this is very roughed in fiberglass and a little bit of filler that I didn't even take the time to brush out. It's just a real quick and dirty job. Back during that time, we were actually underneath a tarp here. It was extremely difficult to work in this space. There was no light, you couldn't breathe. It was pretty bad. And then I just never got back around to it. And it's been covered up, but since I've uncovered it, I think it's really important now to go ahead and sand this, fair it, and then get a coat of primer down here so that we can protect it from the UV rays. So today we're going to be sanding. So we've got this sanded down. It's nice and smooth. There are a couple low spots that we're gonna have to fill in, but it's certainly looking a lot better than it was. Like I said before, this was kind of a quick job. Didn't really finish fairing or anything. When we were underneath that tarp, it was really, really tight up in here at that time. And so now what we're gonna do is take some of these covers off, sand in here, wipe the whole thing down with Xylol, clean it up really good, and then do some more fairing. to keep cleaning this with Xylol until the rag comes up clean, which it is right now. But you can see how dirty this rag was, and that's not good enough. You need to keep switching spots to a clean part of the rag, and then rubbing and checking, and when nothing else starts coming up, then you're good to go. So we're pretty good right now. Alright, so now what we're going to do is mix up a really big batch of epoxy for fairing. And we're going to be primarily using this 407 fairing filler. And this is super low density, kind of reddish brown stuff that is easy to sand and mixes up into the epoxy really well. I'm going to add some of this silica thickener in there. This is kind of like in between 404 and 407. I think this is called 406 in the West systems, but this System 3 stuff is way cheaper. You can get this whole big thing on Amazon for a really good deal. So anyhow, this 404 is really high density. This is for like bonding hardware, for example. You can make something really, really thick and strong. This is on the opposite end of the spectrum. You know, it's not thick and strong. It's light and easily sandable. So it's kind of like the last step just to fair it and make it smooth. And this silica is kind of an in-between where it is light and fluffy, but it is good for like sticking things together, I guess is how I would describe it. So it does a good job for fillets and bonding pieces of like say you want to bond some wood to some fiberglass or something like that. It's really good for that. So when I'm doing fairing, I generally like to do the first coat in a mixture of these two, and then the last coat, like the final fair, with just this. And that's because on the first go round you'll have some pretty low spots, and this is just better suited for those applications. It's just going to be a little bit stronger in the end. So I like to have a mixture of this in there for those super low spots. Now once you're on your last go round, it's not going to be, you're going to be dealing with very, very small imperfections, and this stuff is perfect for that. So anyhow, let's get started here. I'm using the biggest bucket that I have to do this, and again, that's because we do not want this stuff to cure super fast on us, especially since it is starting to get really hot out here now, and the higher the temperature, the faster this stuff is going to cook. So we have to be very careful. Okay, that's probably not going to be enough, but it'll be a good first run, and then we can always mix up some more here in a minute. I would rather do smaller batches that I will be able to use 100% of before it starts to cook than have it cook on me and have to throw away a bunch of perfectly good epoxy because I just wasn't fast enough. So just kind of back to the instructions. I know I've talked about this in the vlog a fair amount, but it was years ago, so I might as well recap here on the videos. You always want to mix this epoxy together before adding any of the fillers. you want to make sure the epoxy is like 100% mixed, because what'll happen is if you throw some of this in there, you have the chance that maybe some of this will soak up in like more hardener and less of the resin, or more resin and less of the hardener, and what you end up with are essentially higher and lower densities of strength, and that's not good. What you're doing with epoxy, from my understanding, is making a molecular bond, and the way that it works is that if you can have those molecules joining together perfectly even, then it gives you very good strength and elasticity. Okay, so it's too thin, but you can see it's like a perfect amber color. I don't know how well you can see that, but once it is completely uniform color, you mix for a little bit longer, and then you're generally good to go. So the problem with this stuff is you can kind of see these little rocks. It joins up together into these little, I'm just going to call them rocks. And they are a pain in the butt to kind of push out and dissolve evenly into the epoxy. That is the only thing I don't like about this silica. What you'll see here in a minute is that the 407 is perfectly smooth. It's just beautiful stuff, and it is way easier to mix. But what we're going to end up having to do here is kind of smoothing out these rocks, and it's just a pain. It's hard to get it really even. So what I'm doing is just mixing it together really well, not worrying about the little rocks too much, and then I'm going to tip the bucket on its side and kind of squish out the rocks. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that, but you see the little chunks? Those are the problems. So what we're going to do is just squish them out. If you don't squish these things out, they're basically like little air pockets in the layup, and again, that just contributes to less strength. And this process sucks. Your hands get tired. You end up having to switch hands. Alright. Now I'm going to pour in some of this 407 low density. And I'll show you, this stuff is way thinner, smooth, good, not chunky. Kind of leaning back because you don't want to breathe this stuff in. I mean, I don't know that it's like super bad for you, but it's certainly not good. Alright, you can kind of see now it's all red. gonna add more. I always feel like I'm adding a lot more than I thought I would have to add, and that's okay. You know, you're gonna have to add a lot, so don't be surprised if you feel like you're pouring it in, because what happens is as you stir, it dissolves into the epoxy and it gets thinner again, so then you end up adding more. You don't want it to be too thin, because then it's just gonna run everywhere. Like, it'll run with the curve of the boat, it won't stick to where you want it to go. And that's not good. Always make sure you're scraping the sides. What you'll find is that more of the powder will end up on the sides, and you just want it to be an even mixture. Okay, I feel like we're pretty good right now, so I'm going to show you the consistency of this stuff. Is thick, but it's not so thick that it's not, you know, runny. So it will still run. And we're going to quickly go out there, pour it down, and spread it out. Alright, so we've got our mixed up epoxy here. This is a batten. You can buy this stuff by the foot, I believe, like off a Defender. So I bought this a while back because you can kind of curve it to the shape of the hole and scrape. I'm going to start up here, so my back's going to be to you. I just don't want to work myself up into a corner, but you'll be able to see what I'm doing. I don't know if you can see that little area that pulled over there, but that means that it's starting to set up. So, yep, and look, we've got a little bit in there and it's already set up. It is freaking hot out here. So, just finish up what we can. And then we're going to clean this off, and we'll be done. So what I'll do is wipe this down real good with this dry towel, then get some Xylol, wipe it down the rest. We'll mix up another batch of epoxy and we'll finish out this right here, let it cure, sand it, start all over again.